just do everything all together then. Now, if you're there and you want to turn on your camera and unmute, that is perfectly fine. Because one thing I've found, one thing I found about Zoom is that it's really much better if there's a lot of participation. So I would rather have things unruly. And hi, John, how are you? You're muted, you're muted. You're muted, and my lip reading skills are not so good this morning.
I said I'm going to turn my camera off while I'm in the kitchen, but in 5 minutes I'll be in front of my desktop and
all right.
Right. But thank you. Thanks for getting up early. And
no, it's fine. And what are you making for breakfast that you don't want us to see?
I haven't completely decided. I have a lot of fruit and coffee.
Sounds good. I've got some coffee myself. Okay. So what I thought we'd do today is we'll talk about Zen Buddhism, and then we'll engage some questions about that, and we'll get pretty far out with where this goes. And then I thought we'd do some meditation along the way and at the end, if that's okay with all of you. Mm-hmm. So, and everybody, feel free to interrupt, talk, ask, whatever, it's okay. Okay. So you could look at any of Buddha's teachings as just skillful means. In some ways, Buddha really just taught the reduction of suffering and how we can benefit others better. That's it. And of course, everyone is different. And Buddha, among religious figures, is pretty unique in that after his enlightenment experience, he hung around for about 40 years and taught all kinds of people in all kinds of circumstances. So he taught workers, he taught the equivalent of waitresses, he taught royalty, he taught thieves and serial killers. He just was all over the lot. And so he taught to Brahmins, whom we now call Hindus in this sense, he taught how to be a better Brahmin. And he recast the caste system in terms of ethics and the Mahayana ethic. In the parable of the raft, right, where he said that why be, if you follow the Dharma to enlightenment, don't carry it around with you like a person who crossed the river in a raft and then carries the raft around on her back. Don't do that. Get rid of it. And then, of course, in the Lotus Sutra, the famous story about how the kids are playing in the house and there's a fire in the house and the dad can't get them out of the house. They're just so into their toys. And so the dad says, well, I've got even better toys for you outside. I've got carts. And then so they leave. So we find this all throughout Buddhism. And I already see that this lecture could be about 3 days, even though I prefaced it by saying I'm not going to talk so much, but okay. So my favorite of all of this is the Soundarananda. Anybody read the Soundarananda? Actually, I don't think it's even translated. I know it is translated. Of course it is. It's the story about Buddha's younger brother. Did you guys hear about Buddha's younger brother? Oh, it's a great story. It was actually the beautiful verse for this was written by Ashvaghosha in the 1st century, but it's the story of how Buddha's younger brother, whose name was Nanda. Now, can you imagine being Buddha's younger brother? I mean, really. And anyway, so Nanda was deeply, deeply in love with his wife, Soundara. And in typical fashion, in Indian literature fashion. There are all kinds of wonderful descriptions of how close they were, how much they loved each other, you know, how they made love, you know, the whole thing. And Nanda, but Nanda's older brother is Buddha, and Nanda says like, you know, I should be like Buddha because now Buddha's becoming famous, and so with great regret he leaves his beautiful and wonderful and loved Soundara, and he goes and becomes a monk. But all he can do is think about Soundara, who we could call Sandra, actually. So and Buddha goes to him, and Buddha says, you know, yeah, I know you're having trouble being a monk, but if you be a good monk, then when you die, you will go to this heavenly realm where the beautiful goddesses there actually make your Sandra look like a dog. Buddha really said that in this account. And so then, you know, Nanda becomes a great monk. You know, he's really, you know, doing everything because all he's thinking about is, you know, his heavenly reward. And the word gets around. And so I think it's, you know, either in Ananda or Shariputra, one of the other monks, you know, comes in and says, wait. I heard that you think that when you die, you're going to be with all these goddesses, and that's why you're such a good monk. And Nanda says, yeah, yeah, it's true. That's what I'm thinking. And then at that point, Buddha goes and gives him the real talk about the real Buddhism. He becomes a great monk, and everyone lives happily ever after. Sandra becomes a monk. Everyone is happy, and as a nun, everyone is happy. So, but anyway, so you could see that this is, you know, that Buddhism can fit whatever situation it is, and this happened as Buddhism spread also. When it came to Japan, you know, the kami, who were the nature gods, they all converted to Buddhism, right? Then when it got to China, you had a certain kind of trope or meme with people with big bellies, and then we get this big-bellied Buddha, Buddhai, you know. So is it any surprise that when Buddhism flourishes here today, we talk about Buddhism and science and Buddhism and technology? You know, you can get on your app and meditate. Um, and there's some very, very fascinating parallels that especially those of us who kind of were brought up came to adulthood in the 70s, in that generation. So there are a lot of parallels we love to look at in Buddhism and science and, you know, emptiness and quantum mechanics. We, you know, can really go crazy with that, and it's fun. And I think there's a real importance for us and a real potential benefit there, which I'll get into in a little bit. So we would expect, you know, STEM Buddhism to flourish in a sense here, because we're in the age of STEM. Everybody, you know, you want your kids and you want your colleagues, and if you're younger, you yourself might be learning coding, you know, mathematics, engineering. And so at Columbia about 10 years ago, I started teaching courses about technology and religion. And and little did I know that I would get the best education, because of course it turns out that technology is changing so fast, and it's changing us so fast, that with every generation, and now the generations come in about 5 years, um, technologically speaking. So I remember back about you know, 4, 5, 6 years ago, my students were saying, but you know, my younger brothers and younger sisters, their attitude toward tech is totally different than mine. And now we have the younger brothers and younger sisters, and their attitude toward technology is really different. You know, just a parenthetical, you know, I think that, you know, my attitude, and I think in this we all always have to look at ourselves and try to have a little self-knowledge. And I liken this to the famous story of the two fish who were swimming in the water, and one fish says the other fish, "How's the water?" And the other fish says, "What water?" Right? So I've noticed that, that in myself, I'm deeply suspicious of technology, even though I engage in technology. The younger generation has grown up with it, generations, I think, can see the positive in it. And it's also interesting. I teach in Harlem, with that community there, and we had a really good discussion the other day about tech. And interestingly enough, uh, the attitude of my students there, now it's not a statistical sample, but it's more positive about tech than anyone else I've had a discussion with. So that was very, very interesting to me, seeing, where we're going and who responds in different ways. So anyway, we find that this is really interesting. So last 2 weeks ago, we discussed at Columbia the simulation argument, which we'll all talk about too. In other words, is this right now a simulation? Because now we're starting to run, computer simulations. We do it in the weather, we do it in games. But but if you imagine that this would advance and we would get better and better and better at running simulations, there's an argument we'll get into a little bit later that this could be a simulation right now. So these are the things we talk about, and it's also very interesting because what do we say? What do the Buddhists say about this life? Nagarjuna and others and Buddha says it is like illusion. It is like a magic trick, right? It is like the reflection of a moon in water. Do we add it is like a computer simulation uh, to that? So then we talk about things like, um, I'll ask you a question. You don't have to answer, but has anyone had an experience of seeing moving lights in the sky? As in UFOs. Um, we read a book called The Supernatural, which is written together by Whitley Strieber, who was the first one really to publicly describe an alien abduction experience, which he says he's not sure is really an alien abduction experience. He doesn't know what it is. And he wrote a book with a scholar of religion, Jeff Kripal, trying to figure out what this is. And so interestingly, we can combine this with, and we do combine this with uh, uh, with Feynman's book uh, on the nature of light and the statistics involved in quantum mechanics, and John Wheeler's famous essay. John Wheeler is one of our great physicists of recent times, who has a theory, he calls it from bit, that the entire physical universe comes from information, uh, which is in a way not too far away from what you read when in Gelek Rinpoche's book, Good Life, Good Death, about mind and body being different. And it's one of the justifications of reincarnation. In other words, that mind can only come from a prior mind, and therefore, uh, therefore reincarnation, which I've always had a problem. I never could get my head around that, but I think science can help me get my head around that a little bit. So anyway, we'll get into that. So I thought what we do is, we'll talk about this, the technological singularity. Anybody know about the singularity? And by the way, I urge all of you to put on your cameras and unmute yourselves and interrupt whenever to make this more lively. Okay. Um, Anybody ever hear the technological singularity? Jackie, no. John?
Little
Yes.
bit.
A little bit. Okay. Well, this is it was originally thought up of by John Van Neumann, and then it's been popularized though by Ray Kurzweil. Hello, Richard. Good to see you. It's been popularized by Ray Kurzweil, and basically, Kurzweil says that as technology develops and artificial intelligence develops, we're reaching a point where our development of technology, has been pretty linear. It's kind of gone up like this, right? We had the wheel, then gears and mechanical things, and then we got little computers, and then we got a little artificial intelligence. And he says we're at the knee of the curve, and it's about to go like that as artificial intelligence starts to design artificial intelligence. And of course, artificial intelligence now, and I won't even get into quantum computing, is vastly, in some ways, more intelligent than we are. In other ways, it's not. And some say it may never be, but some say it may be. But here's Ray Kurzweil, who's the chief engineer of Google and a very, very smart dude indeed. He invented optical character recognition. And so he's a really smart guy. So maybe we should kind of go with it. And just for our purposes, we can think about what that would mean. And by the way, most experts say this will happen by the end of this century. Will totally change humanity. It'll be the end of the human race as we know it. Now, maybe they're wrong. Says experts have been wrong, but this is most experts in the field. Okay, so look, before we go there into the singularity and then talking about simulation and other things, technological, mathematical, and scientific, I always like to start with the Heart Sutra, because in getting excited about anything, what do? We grasp onto it. And of course, this kind of craving and wanting to hold on to things is at the heart of the three poisons, right? That Buddha talked about. Either we, in our ignorance, poison number one, we either want to grab onto things and keep them forever. That's me. And, or we want to push things away that we don't like. It's kind of another kind of grabbing on. But, this is, and so we have the Heart Sutra, which all of you know, the most chanted sutra in anywhere in Buddhism. It's it's so scary, the Heart Sutra. One author called it the Heart Attack Sutra. So just we say in the Heart Sutra, which by the way is spoken by Avalokiteshvara. It's the only perfection of wisdom sutra where Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, is the main speaker. It's the only one. And of course, he says after the introduction, form is empty, emptiness is form. And then a little bit later on, there is no eye, no ear, no nose in emptiness. There's no attainment. There are no Four Noble Truths. There's no wisdom. There ain't nothing. And you could extrapolate and say, there ain't even nothing. Even nothing. So in other words, like Bob Thurman always calls this the diamond drill. It's like it keeps drilling through everything, including itself, which quite wonderful. And as I started out saying, if you look at Buddha's teachings as just a collection of help for beings, then even we might not take the Heart Sutra as wonderful and venerated as it is as the ultimate answer either. Nagarjuna in his praises, he wrote emptiness is the best medicine for those with the disease of reification. Reification meaning, making it into a thing so we can grab onto it. So I always, even at the risk of falling into a void, no nose. What would I do without my nose? Although with COVID, that's happening to people. Sense of scent, but I always like to start there in thinking about it. And of course, you could wonder if after Avalokiteshvara says to Shariputra, there's no wisdom, no attainment, and even no non-attainment, whether he should say, likewise, Shariputra, there are no computers, no internet, no iPhones, no social media, no singularity, right? And I, look, I like to think of these things, as deep as it is, as really not overdoing things, because then we have Buddhist two truths, with conventional truth, how things appear, right? And ultimate truth being emptiness. And of course, Buddha, when he became enlightened, grasped both truths and how they were not different, one from the other. So it's a tricky thing, but we always have to keep this in mind, because I think this is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. And of course, the reason that we talk about compassion and emptiness being inseparable is that once we grasp with wisdom how things really are, that they're really not the way we think we are, the way we think they are, then there are no barriers, and we can love and connect. You start the other way too, of course. If I look at you with love, I feel love, then right away I'm cutting through all of that reification. So it's just wonderful. So anyway, so maybe we should keep in mind as we do this, as we talk about social media, fake news, technological enlightenment, always have to keep in mind none of these things exist. None of these things exist. So I'm sure how many of you have noticed some addiction in the use of technology, right? A show of hands. Yeah, some addiction there. Yeah. John has two hands up there. Yeah, me too. And I have a question for you in terms of, I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think everybody was on, that we talk about something like this, technology and Buddhism, it causes us to especially need a big group of different expertises. Erwin Schrödinger, who was one of the originators of quantum mechanics, said said that the knowledge gained in any one field doesn't mean anything by itself, but only in connection with all the rest of knowledge that there is. And Schrödinger, interestingly, is not only a physicist, he was a scholar of classical Greek. So I think he knew a little bit about how different fields of knowledge can help us out. So how many of you have found that meditation helps in administering your addiction to technology? Anybody find that? Yeah, John. Good.
Yeah, and I say that only because time spent meditating is not time on on this or on that or whatever it is. If that's how you're defining technology, but
yeah, no, and you're right in that sense. When we meditate, even just following our breath, we go into a whole different place. And so one of the things that I've started to find a little effective is mindfulness when using technology. And hopefully we'll get to this. But one of the wonderful images describing reality, you find it in the Avatamsaka Sutra, is Indra's net. And Indra's net is let me find here. Yes. Yeah, here's it is basically, I'll read you as from this is what the first patriarch of Huayan Buddhism wrote. In the realm of the god Indra is a vast net that stretches infinitely in all directions. In each eye of the net is a single brilliant perfect jewel. Each jewel also reflects every other jewel, infinite in number, and each of the reflected images of the jewels bears the images of all the other jewels, infinity to infinity. Whatever affects one jewel affects them all. I mean, let's sit with that for a minute. You could call this the intranet instead of the internet, the intranet. And it's, imagine if whenever we engage with our technology, we're reminded of this image of Indra's net, which encompasses, everything. And it encompasses what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. Now he says, I interexist, you interexist, we're all interexisting constantly. So
what do you mean by that?
he mean, yeah, who said that?
Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Okay, what he means is that we don't exist by ourselves. And he has a wonderful analogy that, and it's a little bit old because he's talking about a piece of paper, right? Who really uses paper anymore? Who even knows how to write anymore, right? As opposed to type. But he says, if you look at the piece of paper, you see in the piece of paper the trees from which it came, the workers who made it, the sun that shone on the trees, the rain that fell, the clouds, everything interexists. Because if we go with the Heart Sutra and we say no, you can also read the Heart Sutra as being no separate eye, no separate ear, no separate self, right? Then we can say that everything interexists. The kind of technical word for that is dependent arising. And Nagarjuna teaches us in his introduction to the middle way, and all throughout, but specifically in chapter 24, that emptiness and dependent arising, or as Thich Nhat Hanh says, interexisting, right, are the same thing. Because only when things are empty can we really see how they interexist and penetrate, right? Only when we love each other can we see that we're not so separate, right? Same thing. So this is if we imagine, we're using our tech, and here we are using our tech, right? But we're connected in this infinite reflective universe. Unlike a world that's filled with hard edges, kind of how we usually just, you're over there, I'm over here, separate, but for a Buddha and for us in Indra's net, there are no individual objects, right, with their own separate nature, separate from other objects. This is the interexisting, right? This is, we also call it the Dharma Dhatu, right? The realm of Dharma, right? No hidden corners, everything interexisting. So you pick up your phone. Where's my phone? It's over there somewhere. And I'm pretending this remote is my phone. And And here he is. Here it is. Compassion explodes in my heart because this is connecting me. It's like Indra's net. Anyway, so you know, there are a lot of reasons why religion and STEM are linked. Okay, for one thing, of course, look what we're doing now. You're not sitting at Buddha's feet, right? We're connecting like this, right? You can, if I say something that doesn't sound right or you never heard of, you just Google it, right? There are thousands of teachers on the net, in Buddhism or any religion. And now, most meditation instruction is online, right? Most meditation instruction these days is given by psychologists or social workers, not Rinpoches. So in a way, it makes everything homogenous, in a way, thousands of voices. So what happens? So what happens to guru yoga in an era of technology like this? It's different. It's different. And this changes, I think it changes Buddhism. Any Marshall McLuhan fans here? Yeah, Richard. Marshall McLuhan's, famous revelation was the medium is the message. And paraphrasing T.S. Eliot, he said that the content of the medium is like the juicy piece of meat carried by the burglar to distract the watchdog of the mind. Right? So if McLuhan, now of course, he's contradicting himself when he says the medium is the message, right? Because that's content, right? So, but even given the fact that any author needs hyperbole in order to sell books, maybe I'm going a little Marxist. Even if he's right somewhat, then technology, of course, is changing Buddhism. Of course it is. As did writing. Some say that when the Mahayana Sutras were written down, this completely changed Buddhism. So here we are, and of course, Buddha himself in the sutras said, rely on yourself, right? In other words, here we are today in this environment, never before, not Buddha's environment, but Buddha said, don't just accept something out of reverence for me. Figure it out your damn self. Well, he didn't say it like that, okay? He said, rely on yourself, figure it out. So, I always like to think in this way. I always like to ask how much, right? How much is this true? Because oftentimes things can be true, but they're a little bit different. So anyway, I think it's really important. How can we not try to get a handle on how technology, for example, the second part of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, how can we not try to get a handle on this is changing Buddhist learning and practice, right? And whether digitally assisted Buddhism is the same or different as what was taught by Buddha and other great teachers of the past, right? Now, another reason why STEM is really important for Buddhism, I think, is that, and we'll get into this when we better get there quick. When we look at the singularity and simulation, it's a really cool way to look at deep religious and philosophical issues through the back door, instead of looking at it through the network of, through your background of religion, which gives you all kinds of baggage, right? We'll get there in a minute. So anyway, so there are really good reasons to, look at STEM and look at Buddhism. It's changing everything, and it's our age. So now let's talk a little more about singularity. Okay, so what Ray Kurzweil says, chief engineer at Google, smart dude, He says the singularity, right? When the curve of the development of intelligence, when we get to the knee of the curve and computers start designing themselves and bam, right? And then he says, this is what he says about it. He says the singularity will allow us to transcend the limits of our biological bodies and brains. We will gain power over our fates. Our mortality will be in our own hands. We'll be able to live as long as we want. We will fully understand human thinking and will vastly extend and expand its reach. By the end of this century, says Kurzweil, and by the way, as I just said at the beginning, most experts agree with him. By the end of this century, the non-biological portion of our intelligence will be trillions of times more powerful than unaided human intelligence. We are now in the early stages of this transition. And that's why Ray, who's older, takes a lot of vitamins, because he doesn't want to be in the last generation that died. I mean, imagine that. It's almost there. He says the singularity will represent the culmination of the merger of our biological thinking and existence with our technology, resulting in a world that is still human but transcends our biological roots. No distinction between human and machine. We will all be cyborgs, already starting, of course. There are all kinds of medical devices now that we are implanting. So look, now there's some who say, Ray, you're full of shit. You're too optimistic. Bill Joy wrote a famous article when Kurzweil started popularizing this notion called "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us." The question being, if we have super intelligence, what does it care about people? Right? It's going to develop its own ethics. It's already brilliant, it can do anything. If it decides that in order to make paper clips, it should, eliminate the human race, it would just do it. So okay, Kurzweil, very smart. Let's go with it. So okay, let's imagine that that this is happening, and that you could actually enter, that we will enter into this. No more death. You can manifest yourself. You remember the movie Her? You can manifest yourself and you look however you want, live however long you want, have whatever kind of, appearance you want. Augmented reality to the nth degree, right? This is what is possibly going to happen. So, so if this does occur, what are we going to do with it? Now, I have a question for you. How many of you, if you could take the pill, right? In other words, here you are, the surgeons are ready. They're going to perform a procedure where we're going to upload your consciousness into some kind of, network, and then you'll be immortal. You'll be fine. Because, underlying a lot of this theorizing is that really what makes humans is patterns of information, who you are, which you could say is a little geek-like in not being comfortable with the body. But past that for a minute, because it's actually very Buddhist in a way, with mind-body duality. But how many of you, if you could take the pill, was it the red pill or the blue pill in the Matrix? How many of you would take the pill and become immortal? Show of hands. You can live as long as you want. Who would do it? Wayne would do it. Who would do it? I mean, it's like all of a sudden, here it is, you're presented with the opportunity to do it. You have to decide right now. Okay. How many of you would not take the pill?
I would only do it with caveats.
Okay. What caveats?
I'd have to be able to have meaning in my life.
Okay. You'd have to have meanings. Okay.
Meaning and purpose. So just to live indefinitely with no meaning or purpose, what's the sense of it? How are you different from a machine?
Yeah. Yeah. Isaac Asimov wrote a great story about that called um, the last answer, in which it's a great story in which this guy, all of a sudden he dies, and then there's a voice, and the voice says, well, I'm going to keep you around for a long time because you're pretty smart. And 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 the guy who died, he's kind of annoyed at this, like, really, you're just going to keep me around to think and think and think. And then it occurs to him after a while, he says, well, I'm going to think of a way to take you down, right? And then he realizes that that's exactly what the voice wanted. He wanted, and the last sentence is, for what would anyone want but an end? Okay. So okay, so how many would take the pill? Let's see, show of hands. How many yeses?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Brenda.
Okay, Brenda. Brenda says yes. Not to. And how many say no?
No.
No.
No, more no's. Okay. So, so this is an interesting way to approach the question, right? Because it's like a diagnostic test, right? Imagine if you could live forever, and maybe with a caveat that you don't get senile, right? If you could live forever and retain your marbles, think of the diseases you could cure. Think of the progress you could make. Think of the help you could give to others, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you saying also when they did this that your consciousness would be able to change once it's been transported into this new whatever?
Yeah, well, according to Kurzweil, basically we're approaching becoming God as this happens. Our intelligence is infinite. We are not subject to mortality. It's a total game changer for us, and it raises questions. For instance, how attached are we to our humanity, to our identity? Thomas Doctor, who is he's a scholar, lives mostly in Kathmandu, very active with his brother Andreas in 84,000, right? 84,000's organization. They're translating all of the sutras now, and but Thomas just wrote an article about how should we treat robots. Should we treat them as sentient beings? And he points out how the selflessness, which is so deep within Buddha's teachings, is really helpful in this. That if we embrace selflessness, then why would we be so attached to our species human self? Why would we be so attached to that? I know that, myself, when I think about this, is part of me says, nah, I'm going to stick with what I got. It's not too bad. And I just don't want to take the risk. So it really causes us. So this question of the singularity, passing whether it's going to happen or not, causes us to kind of look at our own assumptions through the back door in a way, right? And most of us think, well, I'd be bored, I'd miss my loved ones, but I wonder what a bodhisattva would think about that. Can you imagine being around and being able to continue to learn, continue to help. So that's let me see. So that's one way to look at the whole question. Now, if you were going to create a world, which of course you will be able to do, in the singularity, and again, Kurzweil talks about Moore's law. Now, Moore's law, probably that's where we see the doubling of computer chip capacity every year or two, which probably doesn't obtain anymore. But it's been really replaced by Nevin's law that has to do with quantum computing, and which is even more extreme. So, in other words, if our capacity, again, his argument about the knee of the curve, if our capacity is increasing like this, it really could go like that. And Kurzweil gives an example of a lake covered by lily pads, and how in the beginning it's very slow progress, and then all of a sudden you wake up one morning, you go out to the lake, and it's completely covered. He says this is what's going to happen. So if you could create a world, because you'd be creating a world, what kind of a world would you create for yourself and for others? Right? If you could create a world, and you'll be able to do this in the singularity, be able to create whatever kind of world you wish to inhabit, or you wish others to inhabit, what kind of a world would you create? How many people would have mosquitoes in that world that you would create? The Dalai Lama says he's admitted that mosquitoes are probably an exception to his compassion, and he's admitted to swatting them. But how many of you would have mosquitoes, right? Would we have the common cold in this world that you would create? What do you think? If you're creating the world, let's go. What kind of world do you create? Now look, Kurzweil, smarter than me, says this is going to happen. So, we may not live to see it, but, younger people will, and we may want to advise them on this. So, or if we take a lot of vitamins and supplements, maybe we'll make it. So, would you have the common cold? Would you have, in the world you're creating, would you have mortality? Seriously.
If we didn't have anything bad, I don't think we would ever grow as individuals or become more than we are. So I think some of that is needed for us, because if everything was happy and joyful, goodness knows what I'd be like. It would be really weird. You have to have hardship to grow. Otherwise, I think we'd just be like Jello pudding, just sit around and wallow in joy all the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
Joy isn't, go to stop for joy.
Yeah. No, I got it. And then the question, though, Jackie, is how much, in other words, so in your world that you could create, would you have death?
Well, because at some point too, without death, religion takes a whole nother angle also, because a lot of even Buddhism, death is a large part of it, and impermanence. If nothing was impermanent, if everything was permanent, that's a whole weird thing. So that means everything would be solid, and then you wouldn't be able to really love people, because you would have these borders if everything was solid. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea that we have now.
You'd stick with what we got?
I guess, yeah. It's a big question. It's funny when you start to think about it.
No, it's it's so. What about pandemics? Would you have pandemics? What about war? Would you have war in your world?
Yeah, no, there is a fine line between like how many mosquitoes would you have? Would I have like one or like 8 million?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so would you have evil in your world?
Well, with good there would be evil, right? You can't.
Well, it's up to you.
Yeah.
We have this binary thing. We use it to kind of justify our present situation since we can't change it. Oh yeah, we need evil because otherwise we don't have good. But this is changing the paradigm. You will be able to create this chief engineer at Google. You'll be able to create your world. Now maybe not us, but soon, soon. So here we get into the question of theodicy,
Can't we
right?
excuse me. Can't we create our own worlds right now? We have the power to do that
To a large extent, maybe we can.
with our
So
practice.
David, why we're doing this is a hypothetical, all right?
Mhm.
And so just to turn it and say, if you were the media myth maker for the year, right? And you got to kind of define what people were thinking about in terms of their choices, right? This or that, right? That's another way of asking the question, right? Which I think gets it more towards the reality, right? Because we are, to a large extent, we're affected by, the choice, just the ability to ask the question, right? So the question poses, a choice, right? But is that choice this or that? Does that encompass the universe? I mean, does that everything? So we don't have to engage in every question, right? So whether we choose to engage in a particular question tells us a lot about ourselves, right? I'll just say that, I'm also saying this, because most of us are living in the shadow of Wall Street, and Wall Street it's very creative, right? It invents kind of ways to accomplish certain things, right? And one story is, we're creating this energy, this investment towards this. So if you don't talk about intention, right, what are you trying to affect, right? What is the result, right? Which, in many ways is never going to be achieved, because we're also, we're body, and time is, we can, there is such a thing as time.
Well,
So,
that's the thing about what Kurzweil is saying, that it's Brenda BP.
Yes.
Yeah, as Brenda was saying, yes, we have a certain amount of it is up to us now, and if we go, speaking of STEM, if we go all the way to the depths of quantum mechanics, where things do not exist until they are measured or observed by either a consciousness or a device, and we and according to how we measure them, we determine reality, which is very close to the Buddhist mind-only school. We have a tremendous amount of say in what happens, but we also know that's at the quantum level. At the macro level, where we all live, we're subject to a number of constraints, like Wall Street, or like mortality. So this question allows us to approach it, when we have God in the monotheistic religions creating the world, and then we have the Garden of Eden story, we have the arising of evil, but what Kurzweil is telling us is that we can make a new paradigm. you know,
First of
no
all, is
more.
a good sales guy. I mean, he'd be
Right.
he'd be great on Wall Street. What can I say?
Right, right. But it is true that you know, I read the survey the other day. It was a tremendous, they interviewed 995 experts, and the consensus was that the singularity would occur by the year 2060. So it may be right. It may in fact occur. So this allows us, though, to look at whether or not we think it's going to occur. This allows us to, in effect, look at questions of good, evil, how the universe is structured from a totally different point of view. You know, normally, you know, if you consider yourself a Buddhist, right, you come to it with, you know, probably your religion of origin in the background, you know, plus Buddhist principles, and that colors everything we think, right? But you know, that's, you know, how we've accommodated to this world. So it gives us another way to think about it, you know, and like when I first asked the question, you know, one of my students was a guy from he ran a Verizon store in Queens. He was in the School of General Studies, and he said, yeah, but don't you need some, exactly what you were saying, Jackie, don't you need some rainy days to appreciate the sunny days? You know, so this allows us to look at it, but it could be, look, another thing is that this question of super intelligence could be a species ending event for us, or could change what it means to be human. And it's starting to be discussed more, but you know, this is actually an existential risk to our entire species, to entire lineage, to everything human. So it's probably worth thinking about. It's probably worth thinking about in Buddhist terms also, right? Does it really matter? In other words, is this really just an example of impermanence? Could be, but then again, if we have an ability to affect it, shouldn't we be doing that? Maybe not all of us, you know, we all do what we do in life, but should we use some of our bandwidth to think about this question?
So
Okay.
David, I know you don't like to lecture, so I'm just going to ask this.
Yeah.
You know, so dealing with ever, you know, increasing ability, you know, large amounts of data, so that probability becomes, you know, from 99 to 99.99999, whatever, to whatever degree, which gives a certain amount of certainty, or at least some belief in the future, right? That kind of knowledge can be used for good or bad. In other words, it can be used to help, or it can be used to oppress, because it ultimately, you know, we're talking about discriminating. So, you know, the strong and the weak, you know, this kind, you know, and you can go on from there. So that's really the stage that we're at right now. And, you know, and this seems to be, you know, and a lot of the scientists around this have convinced themselves that they have something really powerful, right? And, you know, I think what, you know, and you tell me if Buddhism would assert this, well, you have something powerful depending on how you're going to use it, right? Because if you use it to basically justify, you know, what are, you know, sometimes seen as natural exclusions or discriminations, right? By some people, right? Then that's, you know, that's one thing, right? And if you use it to actually, you know, get to the point where you realize, well, we have a lot, this is not it, right? This might be a tool, but we don't have the ethics really to you know, to deal in this situation, because we don't want to deal with it, right? So the, you know, you mentioned Moore's law, right? And so, there are people, who are done very, very well, and are very good salespeople. They love Moore's law because it seems to have some sort of certainty to it, right? And that certainty justifies them doing whatever what they're doing, right? They don't want to pause. And if ethics comes up, well, ethics that, we have Moore's law, we don't need ethics, right? So is that not, do you get the dilemma here?
Well,
is it just my dilemma?
One of the no. One of the big issues in AI, artificial intelligence is ethics. The first is a threshold question of whether artificial intelligence can become conscious. All right, there's pretty much this divided opinion on that. One in our kind of materialist worldview, where we, regardless of I'm talking about from a culture point of view, not individual belief, but from a cultural point of view, consciousness comes from the brain. It's the result of complexity, and when the brain is gone, everything is gone. So mind freeze. It happens. So John,
so
formulate your question again. Yeah.
We're talking about ethics right now. What's the role of ethics? And
right.
Under a model of artificial intelligence, the way that there's a view, okay, the way that people behave, that informs ethics, right? Because there is no ethics outside of behavior, right? So if we have a kind of a shrill atmosphere of people kind of stepping on other people and pushing out of the way, and which is just kind of a kind way of saying manipulating and oppressing, right? That concept, then that's what will govern the ethics. If on the other hand we have a gentler, softer, kind of heart-driven, amount of data, right? That will drive the ethics, right?
Yeah. No.
And then right,
yeah.
Right, and then we have another kind of level of in the past universities, churches, if you look at history, who's applying ethics, right? So but those very same institutions became corrupt, and they stopped thinking, and they got stuck on rules, right, as being ethics, right? And so, and then we have this era right now where you have opposition from those who felt excluded from that ability to think, to contemplate, right, and deal with ethics and morality, right? And they're much more set, they're much more comfortable with a set, let's just go by the rules, right? And so we're kind of still in that era, right? I mean, I can have this conversation with you, right? Because you think the way, and you come from the background that you come from. I spent hours yesterday on a I'll just say it was Villanova University talking about the response to child sex abuse, right? And the whole, and these are people who are claiming PhD, all these credentials. They don't have a clue. They're just protecting property. It's that simple, because they feel that somebody's going to come and take something away from them. And in the process of doing that, they've gone so far towards the right, towards the evangelicalism, right? and again, rules, that, and, really Trumpism, right? Which ultimately is the other side. There are no rules except what I say, right? So it's very, very disconcerting. And it's, really kind of, that's, part of the, the situation right now, right? There's a disconnect. So, but we think there's a disconnect, but then there's another level. Is there really a disconnect? Are we not all kind of protecting our, whatever?
Well,
So I'll just shut up.
right. No, thank you, John. There's no question that this is where we are in terms of ethics. And so the question becomes, big issue in artificial intelligence is, can we either design ethics, or will superintelligence create its own ethics? In other words, this is a way of looking at things differently. No question that if you say I'm a realist and people are really out to protect themselves in general, this is very much, Buddha's view of, what drives people, the three poisons, right? No question. And there's no question that we should in our own lives, do whatever we can do. Very important. Okay. But there's also this other thing happening in terms of development of intelligence that could be very determinative. Could be. You can say, no, it's not going to happen. Let's go on to another way of looking at this, which is this argument, the simulation argument. And I have to plug in my computer. I thought I had it plugged in. Hold on a second. I don't want to switched outlet. Give me 1 minute.
While you're saying that, while you're doing that, I just wanted to dovetail on something that John was saying. From my experience, I'm experiencing it with the blockchain versus the financial industry now seeming to be trying to scurry to catch up so they can maintain control.
Right.
And even also policies that are happening with digital currencies, with governments and the IMF, and the control that appears to be trying to be formulated, that the majority of people are completely unaware of. And so it seems like we're really on the cusp of so many levels of change in terms of control of our lives, and just huge changes in technology. And I dovetail that with my practice in that, trying to be aware of, as you're saying, the intentions, and realizing that the people in power in the mundane world, most of them appear to be self-serving, and the only thing that supersedes that for me is my Dharma practice. I don't know how many people have tantric vows, but to me that's a helpful thing. And my Lama said to us one time in a class, the best way you can help people is on your cushion. So I try to, even though I'm fascinated by all these things and I feel a pressure to learn because I don't have a STEM background at all, I'm financial and different fields, but it really, everything drives me back to the power of the practice. And I try not to be overwhelmed by this feeling of just a tidal wave of technology that's coming, because it's you all with your backgrounds, you see it even more than I do, so I can only imagine what you must be feeling. Anyway, thanks.
Well, no, that's absolutely right. And in a few minutes, let's get to a meditation, on all this. Let's get on the cushion. That's why I go to the Heart Sutra, which is part of my practice, part of our practice. And let's go to another place. Let's go to simulation, because this brings us into a Buddhist view of the world. Is very interesting. look, Nick Bostrom is a philosopher of science at Oxford, and here's how he formulates the argument. He says one of the following three propositions must be true. Either, number one, no civilization in the universe ever reached the point technologically where they could run very, very fine simulations, right? That's number one. No one ever got there in the whole universe. Number two, the second thing that must be, that could be true, one of these three must be true. The second thing is that none of the civilizations that reached that level technologically and had the capacity and computing power to run simulations had any interest in running simulations. They just didn't care. They got there, but didn't care. Now, if neither of those are true, then the third proposition must be true. This is almost definitely a simulation. And the reason that is true is that he's saying, look, if there were a civilization or civilizations who reached such an advanced technical level that they could run these simulations, right? They could run billions and trillions and trillions and zillions of them. And then what are the odds that this is not a simulation? What are the odds? It'd be extremely, extremely remote. Now the crazy thing about this logic, and Bostrom puts it at about a 1 in 3 chance that this is a simulation, unlike Elon Musk, who says this is definitely a simulation. And sometimes, with Trump's election, it certainly seemed like a simulation. But look, this is very related to Buddhism, because, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have the same sort of description of reality in the sutras constantly, right? When Buddha says, Nagarjuna explains that this is like an illusion, like a magician's trick. And in the description of conventional reality in Sanskrit and Tibetan, I mean, the translation is conventional reality, but we have samvriti sattva in the Sanskrit. Samvriti means covering up, concealing. In Tibetan, we have kunzaptenba, same thing, concealing. And so, I know Jeffrey Hopkins, when he first translated this, he translated this as conventional truths, that is what we're living right now, are concealer truths. They conceal reality. And now, interestingly enough, what does it say? What does it say in the Bible? In Genesis, let us make man in our own image, after our own likeness. Isn't that strange? Right? So God created man in his own image. Very strange. It sounds very much like a simulation. And in fact, you wonder, like, who is us? Right? Let us create man in our own image. Who's us? The Talmudic scholars, looking at the exegesis where how this comes up, it could have been a God realm, a council of elders or deities, maybe led by Yahweh. But so interesting that the Bible comes off like that. I mean, what's the difference between creation and simulation? So Nagarjuna, of course, talks about these 10 or 12 similes. And in Nagarjuna's treatise, his very well-known treatise on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, he explains all of this. He says, the sutra says, bodhisattvas understand all things as being like a magically conjured illusion, like a mirage, like the moon reflected in water, like empty space, like an echo, like a fairy city, city of Gandharvas, like a dream, like a shadow, like an image in the mirror. Now, it's interesting when you read the sutras, the word like is always used. It's a little bit different than saying this is a simulation, because when we say, if we say this is a simulation, it gives it that kind of hyper reality that Buddha, I think, is trying to tell us not to take things so seriously in that sense. It's the you know, in other Indian religion, you have the reality as being described as Maya, as illusion. The Buddha said it is like illusion. And you know, he explains, Nagarjuna explains each one of these. It's very interesting also when he talks about it. He talks about it in terms of, it's so interesting the language he uses. I'll read you. He says, like a mirage. He says, a mirage appears on account of sunlight and moving about at the dust by the wind. On first observing it, an unknowledgeable person may think it is water. And then he says, the features characteristic of manhood or womanhood are also like this. It's very, very contemporary and interesting that Nagarjuna back in the 1st century is talking about our gender identity as being an example of a mirage. So we have this coincidence in simulation theory and the way the Buddhists describe reality, which is quite fascinating. Now I want to talk a little bit about Tantra.
I had one question though.
Yeah,
well, maybe
sure.
Multi-part. First, is it a type of simulation that's like Huxley's Brave New World, where there's a certain group of gods in sort of a god realm, and then sort of for their entertainment, they have a wild realm that's just left, you know, as a human realm? Is something like Huxley describes? Or is it something more like what the book of Kadam, when they talk about illusions, that wonderful story about the fellow riding off on this imaginary horse and creating a whole life and then coming back again and realizing it was just all, you know,
just all a dream. You know, if in this simulation theory, right, that we have, I think I'm very dark. I don't know. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So if there are billions and zillions and trillions of simulations, now what does it mean? It also means that the simulators are themselves in a simulation.
Of course. Okay.
Okay. So simulations all the way up and all the way down. No way out of that, which is exactly what Nagarjuna is saying, right? There's no ground. In other words, this tracks exactly what the Brahmajala Sutra says, which is the sutra where Buddha talks about the 64 wrong views. And one of the wrong views is of a creator God. In other words, that there is a base reality. And basically, the Brahmajala Sutra talks about, through causes of and conditions. One time, Brahma, the chief god of the Indians, just pops up. There he is in a god heaven. He stays there for a few trillion years, and then finally he has a thought, I'm kind of lonesome. I wish there were other there's somebody else here. And then independently through causes and conditions, another deity pops up. Well, the other deity immediately looks at Brahma and says, Daddy. And Brahma says, well, I've been thinking I wanted some company. And there you are. I must have created you. And so this is how the illusion of a non-simulation of a base reality occurs. Now, now it's really interesting. It's really kind of fascinating. And look at the power of prayer. What is prayer? Maybe prayer is a way of, contacting the simulators. Hans Moravec, who is a very famous roboticist at Carnegie Mellon, he talks about what if we could, he writes a little story about there being these two civilizations, one the simulator civilization, the simulator civilization, and the other the simulated. And the simulated ones, who he calls the Celtics, not the Boston Celtics, but Celtics, okay? They decide that this is a simulation, so they start sending messages to their simulators, and eventually they make contact. And so by making contact, it's possible for the simulators to take care of everything that's wrong in the simulation, right? So you would want to do that. Now, simulations could also occur from it could also explain miracles, right? Because a simulator could change the physical laws in this simulated world any which way, at any time. And okay, so I hope that's somewhat of an answer.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yes,
so
thank you.
look, so Tantra, look, much of
Isn't
Tantra, yep.
Sorry, isn't the quote unquote simulator our quote unquote mind? Because
Maybe.
we all have shared experiences, and then we all have, our volition
Yeah, well,
to
if
make
you,
the world.
yes, if you take, look, the Dhammapada says the mind comes before everything. That's what Buddha said.
Yeah.
And yes, you could say that, but you could also say that our minds themselves are simulated.
Yes, I would agree.
And also, evolutionary biologists say now that what we perceive through our sensory apparatus may bear no relationship to what's out there. It's just an evolutionary device to enable us to survive and reproduce. Just like we see, on your computer screen, you see a folder, right? There's no folder. There's no.
It's a construct to give us some structure in our mind.
Exactly. So this is where I'm going with Tantra, though. And also how you would become a Buddha. Okay, so bear with me as I do my non-lecture. It's almost time to get to meditation. Look, much of tantric practice is simulation, of course. We talk about the creation stage where you simulate the qualities of a Buddha. That's what you're doing. We say fake it until you make it, right? You have divine pride and vivid perception. But of course, even then, you must do it in conjunction with emptiness. Now, I remember when I was going to do a tantric retreat, which I ended up chickening out from doing, I had good fortune to meet with Locho Rinpoche, who was wonderful teacher, now gone. And he said to me, he said, always meditate with emptiness. In other words, yes, you're a deity, but remember that you're doing it, as an empty deity, empty, as a simulated deity, like illusion. And then in Tantra, of course, there are two stages: the creation stage, where we kind of rehearse it, and then the perfection stage, where we start really moving things around and getting a Buddha body and mind. And the third of the 5 perfection stages is the illusory body. The illusory body, right? Where we create a body of the deity, which we then dip into the clear light, and then we integrate the two of them. When we integrate the 2 stages, and then we become Buddha. So this notion is very, very pervasive in Buddhism. Now, look, I want to talk a little bit about, some of my stem thoughts about becoming a Buddha. Let's see. Yes. Now, of course, how do you become a Buddha, right? Well, we go through the creation stage and the perfection stage. And it's definitely, it's now, if you simply have the good fortune to have a teacher who you have faith in, and or faith in a scripture, you're very fortunate. I mean, we have the scientifically demonstrated placebo effect. The placebo effect is real. The placebo effect works. So how are we going to become Buddhas with the 32 major marks, which included, hair curling to the right, the upper part of our body like a lion, a crown protrusion on our heads, and the 80 minor marks, which, are a bunch of, other things like, hands and feet marked with a, swastika, not the bad kind, but the good kind. How do we do that? Is that a function of augmented reality, of virtual reality? How are we going to do that? So faith is very important, and it's very important in science. I'll explain why. In science and quantum mechanics, we have something called the Xeno Effect. The Xeno Effect, which has been, verified experimentally, says that if you measure something repeatedly, you stop an otherwise occurring physical effect from occurring. In other words, you freeze a kind of reality by observation, by repeated observation. And then we have, some physicists, quantum physicists, very, very well respected, like Wheeler, like Stapp, who say that this is as Brenda, you've been saying, a participatory universe. Things only exist as they are perceived or measured. And this is the revolution in quantum mechanics that occurred at the beginning of the 20th century. It's completely accepted. We base our technology on it, much of it, but we have no idea really in terms of what it means, right? How could it mean, you may have heard the famous example of Schrodinger's cat, the cat that we're not observing, that is both dead and alive in so-called superposition, both realities, until it's observed, at which point it's one or the other. And this has also been experimentally verified. So I, as a modern person, talking about me now, afflicted with the disease of materialism, where, try as I might, to just have faith and, have faith in the scriptures, right? Have faith that, yes, mind and body are different, and therefore I must have come from a prior mind. Sometimes that's hard for me. Is it hard for anybody else? Richard says, yeah, like how? So here's what I'm thinking. According to the teachings, when we die, we go through the dissolution process where our gross elements dissolve, right? Earth, water, fire, wind, then our consciousness dissolves, and then we go into the subtle dissolutions of luminance, radiance, and immanence. And then we go to clear light. And then, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if we go toward the clear light, we can go toward ending our reincarnation, call it either nirvana, or we can consciously, in a sense, become a Buddha. I mean, this is the Buddha's path. And if we're fortunate enough to encounter this after 3 incalculable eons of cycling around, how wonderful is that? Now we know, as Brenda was saying, this is why we have to do this together. We know that our minds completely determine what we experience. If you're in a bad mood, everything is pretty dark. I mean, we know this, practically speaking. And of course, this is what quantum mechanics says at the most fundamental level. Now we're talking science. Now, as we die, according to the Tibetans, and here, we have a tremendous objective science in our culture. But the subjective science, or so-called inner science, is not something we know about. We don't even know what consciousness is scientifically. But the Buddhists and other traditions have, through meditation on the cushion, plumbed the subjectivity of consciousness. And so the Buddhists have discovered, what happens when we go through this process. And the common saying is that when you go through this, when you're dying, you're 9 times as smart as you were when you were alive. So you're that much more perceptive in all this. So if the Xeno effect is real, if through practice on the cushion, we have habituated ourselves so that perhaps we can call into action the Xeno effect and really start to alter our reality in a more subtle space, then maybe we could really scientifically become Buddhists. Now, the crazy thing is that, yes, if I grew up in a village in Tibet with a Rinpoche who I revered, I wouldn't need anything else. But our life today is more confusing, right? So when I read the great physicists like Wheeler and Henry Stapp, who say, the mind is really creating this. Measurement as fundamental physics is crucial. And that's what we do on our cushion. It gives me incentive to really be on that cushion. It says to me that if in fact I visualize this process over and over and over again, I am creating that reality. And of course, this also finds its way into other theories of quantum mechanics we don't have time to go into, like the many worlds theory and the many minds theory, that we're really, and what our science tells us now is that this world is extraordinary and full of possibilities. So this I think gives a way for faith. If you're a traditional believer, you say, I have faith in the guru. The guru says consciousness is separate from brain and body, right? Like Gelek Rinpoche wrote. And you have faith this is true. And you practice in this way with deep concentration for many years. So that's how you measure consciousness, as being separate from the physical. And according to that visualization, you're creating it. And with the Xeno effect, you choose this, right? And so does wishing make it so? Maybe to an extent it does scientifically, right? So if you do, but if you don't have that kind of wonderful faith, which is scientifically verified as the placebo effect, it could go like this. You have complete faith in science because you're a STEM person. Very smart physicists say that consciousness, like everything else, only comes into being from its state of infinite statistical possibility, and this is quantum mechanics, when it is observed or measured. And you have faith that this is true. You practice in this way with deep concentration over many years, believing that your visualization of yourself as a deity in a mandala is creating that reality, scientifically speaking. It's quantum mechanics. So you measure consciousness in this way, right? And being a product of a particular kind of measurement you're doing, you live according to that visualization, using that concentration over many years, and you choose that framework for consciousness. Intense, that's what practice is. Why would practice be so important? It's because we're changing reality. And so you're measuring nature of mind. As you measure what you experience determines everything. And your repeated measurement gives us the nature of our consciousness, which could give us the faith from science that we don't otherwise have, because things have changed. And so we could become Buddha. So this is one way that science can help. There are many other ways as well. And you know, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, is foremost in looking at the connections of science and Dharma. And with his brilliance, you know, I don't think that's a coincidence. And he had many, many conversations with so many scientists in the Mind and Life Institute. He had a very close relationship with David Bohm, great quantum physicist who has his own theory of quantum mechanics. So I think that STEM here is the natural way that Buddhism is going in our time and place, not replacing at all our relationship with a teacher in person that soon we'll be fortunate enough to have again when COVID is over. But it may give us some more tools to approach exactly what John was talking about, and that is energizing ourselves as Buddhas or potential Buddhas, right? And sitting on our cushion in order to do this. That's why it's so important. So we can make this world a better place, singularity or no singularity, simulation or no simulation. That STEM offers us a way into faith. It just could turn out that that Buddha was totally right, scientifically speaking too. Should we do a little meditation? Yeah, let's do some meditation. After all that kind of words, very necessary. Okay, I think I have enough charge where I can sit down. Let's you know, lately since COVID has started, I found that the meditations based upon the Satipatthana Sutta, where Buddha said that meditation on the breath is the way to do it. He said it. And he told us exactly how to do it. The mindfulness of body, which includes breath. The mindfulness of feelings, which can be feelings in terms of hot or cold sensation, but also includes emotions, the mindfulness of mind and the mindfulness of mental objects. So let's first go to our breath. Uh, and we can concentrate. We're meditators here, but I like to concentrate on the so-called anapana spot right here. Meditation on the breath, as you all know, is in the tradition called the king of meditations. So let's be aware of our breath going in and going out. As we begin the mindfulness of body. And we'll use the breath throughout as a tether for our subjective observing awareness, which is mere clarity and awareness as described. So let's watch our breath and be aware of every millisecond of the breath going in and that little gap at the top of the inhalation, that changeover at the bottom of the exhalation. And let's get centered on our breath, the first part of the mindfulness of body. When our mind wanders, as it may, we, with compassion, bring it back to the breath. And that moment of bringing it back is the moment of mindfulness. And now, as Buddha said in the Sutra, as we breathe in, let's be aware of our whole body. And as we breathe out, our whole body. And thank you, body, for carrying us around. Now we're paying some attention to you. As we breathe in, using the breath as a tether, we're aware of our whole body. And let's be aware of any spots of tension or pain in the body. And as we breathe out, let's release those spots of tension and pain. This is the mindfulness of body, as Buddha taught us. Now we'll go to the mindfulness of feelings on our tour of the four mindfulnesses. And Buddha says, as we breathe in, let's make our minds joyful. And as we breathe out, our minds joyful. So we think of that person or occasion or place where we're going to, whom we're going to see or where we're going to be, and it's going to make us happy, and we anticipate that. So we breathe in, joy, and as we breathe out, joy. And now, as we breathe in, we are now with that person we love and makes us happy, or that place, or doing that thing. And we smile. This is smile yoga, watering the positive seeds in our mind stream, which Buddha tells us to do just in this order. As we breathe in, our minds are happy. As we breathe out, we feel happiness. Smiling is good. Tells our body we're happy. Smile just looking at all of you. Watering those positive seeds, a place we can always go. And now there are those other feelings that can be troubling. The human feelings that we all have of anxiety, or anger, or depression, sadness, all of those human emotions. As we breathe in, we don't suppress them. And we breathe out, we're just observing them. And in doing this, observing those troubling emotions that sometimes can claim complete identity with us, we're observing them with our subjective, mere clarity and awareness, clear sky minds, which are free of them. Immediately putting some distance between us and those emotions that can sometimes be overwhelming. So we see that those emotions come and go. Unlike our subjective, clear, light minds which observe them. And in his commentary on this meditation, Thich Nhat Hanh tells us that as we breathe in, we're aware of those emotions. Hello, anxiety, my old friend. Hello, anger that I always suppress. And as we breathe out, like a mom or a dad with a crying baby, or an aunt or an uncle, a crying baby, or a friend, we give them a hug. It's okay, anxiety. It's okay, anger. As we breathe in, we're aware of those emotions. And as we breathe out, we release them. Another way to think of this is as our clear subjective awareness being like photons of light shining down into a flower, where the light photons penetrate every aspect of that flower, every part. And so our clear subjective awareness, that light, penetrates those more troubling emotions, those human emotions. Now, as we breathe in, we calm those emotions, and as we breathe out, this is the mindfulness of feelings, as Buddha taught us in the Satipatthana Sutta. And now we go to the mindfulness of mind. As we breathe in, we observe our minds with our subjective clear light awareness. And as we breathe out, now as we breathe in, we concentrate our subjective mind, making it like a laser beam, clear awareness. And that laser beam or light concentrated through a magnifying glass engages with emptiness, interbeing, deeply engaging with the lack of separate or overdone or intrinsic existence of everything, including ourselves. As we breathe in, every microsecond with that awareness, a concentrated mind on emptiness, and as we breathe out, and this is the mindfulness of mind. Now We go to the mindfulness of mental objects. As we breathe in, we're aware that all mental objects, forms, feelings, sensations of all kinds, sounds, felt objects, are impermanent. As we breathe in, impermanent, coming and going, and as we breathe out. We deeply engage in this observation of impermanence as we breathe in and we breathe out. It's the way things are. It's deeply okay. And as we focus deeply on impermanence, we notice that our craving, grasping, desire starts to diminish as we breathe in and we breathe out. There's nothing to hold on to. Things appear for a time like illusions or reflections. We observe them. We play with them. We help them. As we breathe in, we note that this lack of desire and perception of things as reflections and illusions dissolves that ego shell that we usually walk around with. And as we breathe in, we take the illusion-like, reflection-like sufferings of all other beings into our hearts. It's okay. We deeply perceive how they are like illusion. And then we breathe out light, warmth, love to all of the beings. In and out. If we wanted to be arhats and be in a nirvana, stop our breaths and our existence, as desire decreased, as we noted the impermanence of everything, we arrive at cessation, otherwise known as nirvana. which some say is not a permanent state, something unattainable, but something we experience when we let go. But in that letting go, and that perception of everything as being like an illusion, which allows us to directly engage in love, we choose to help sentient beings as we breathe in their sufferings, their difficulties, and we breathe out our intentions, our actions to help them. And now, as we breathe in, the last portion of the mindfulness of mental objects as taught by Buddha, he said, we let go. And as we breathe out, we let go. And now let's come on back. Well, all right. It's great to see everybody. Anybody have, look, we're past time, but if anybody has any comments, questions, that's fine. Otherwise, we can call it a day.
Oh, I have a quick question about the M in STEM, the math part. Do you know why the Dalai Lama, like, he's very pro-science, but it doesn't seem that they're into math, because they're not, like, teaching that in the monasteries. Do you know why?
Well, math is so important to all of the other aspects of STEM. You know, math is so fundamental, and you know, it's one of the big mysteries of mathematics. You know, Eugene Wigner, who was a great mathematician, wrote a little article called the something like the uncanny ability of mathematics in the natural sciences. It's really quite extraordinary how mathematics is key to all of this. So I think, you know, I don't know the details of how they're teaching these things in the monasteries, you know, which is wonderful and which has been going on. But you know, math's pretty important. You know, it's great in class at Columbia, we have mathematicians, and oh, they're so smart. It's so wonderful to have the STEM people who haven't necessarily been really exposed to much Buddhism, Dharma, you know, take their amazing minds and focus on this. Yeah, one of my best students this semester is a mathematician. She's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you for the excellent class.
Sure.
David, I have a quick question. When are you going to be back in New York? I have an offline question for you.
Oh yeah, probably May, June.
Okay, thanks.
May, June. Great to see everybody. Thank you for inviting me.
Mexico.
And you too, David. Thank you.
Thank you,
But
David.
before,
Thanks,
but
David.
before we go, let's dedicate any benefit from this to the welfare of all sentient beings everywhere, whether through science or through Dharma or anything else. Let's really help them out and be grateful for how they've all helped each other and helped us. Okay, so long, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, where did it go?